Good evening, Mr. Perfects. We are live right now. Welcome to TRH, the Reconnection Hour by Mr. Perfect. I'm Terry, founder, CEO, Mr. Perfect. What is Mr. Perfect? Well, as most of you know, we bring men together at barbecues to create communities and connection for the betterment of mental health and to reduce isolation. What's TRH? The Reconnection Hour. We chat to health professionals, our own barbecue hosts, and other people doing incredible things in the world of either mental health, connection in the community, you name it. So we'll be chatting to a couple of great guys tonight, which I'll introduce shortly. An update on the week for us and for me. Me personally had an incredible session with my psychologist yesterday. Hadn't done it for a few months. Had a great catch up and covered a lot of ground and progress. And yeah, it was really nice to reflect on it and see how far sort of I've come, I guess, and how this current situation hasn't really dampened me. And yeah, so it was kind of a pat on the back for myself, which I don't do too much. So all good on that front. Everyone else is healthy, which is good. And we've got our barbecues coming back. So we will have to abide by some stringent restrictions. However, pretty much, I'd say 70% of our barbecues will be back in June. So check our Facebook events page for all of them. We'd love to see you guys there. We will be promoting them a lot more coming up. And we've got a few new locations starting as well. Quick disclaimer, I mention this at the start of every one we do or any video I do. We might discuss more sort of, I don't know, we'll discuss mental health generally, right? We always do. It's normally in a very casual manner, but if anything sort of triggering comes up, just to be warned that it may or may not come up. So just to be aware. So as I said, some of the people we normally talk to are guys doing great work in men's connection. I chatted to these guys a long time ago via email when we were, I can't remember how we got connected, but it might have been through the AMHF or similar. And we didn't actually get a chance to chat properly or meet, but we finally do. And today we chat to David Pointon and Ben Hughes from the Men's Table. I'll tell you a tiny bit about it. The Men's Table brings together men who meet once a month for dinner, and I'm going to let them describe the rest of it because I'm sure they'll do a better job. So welcome tonight to David and Ben from the Men's Table. How are we going?
Yeah, good.
Good
How
stuff.
are you?
Good stuff. Very well. Very good. Very good. Right now, I've got one of my best mates' birthdays tomorrow. It's the first time I will be in a pub for probably 4 months, which is really, and so I'm pretty happy about it. My wife's not very happy because she knows I'm going to come back not in a great state, but I'm pretty pumped for it. So.
Yeah, nice.
Actually, I was just at a costume shop about 2 hours ago. There's a group of us going up to the Blue Mountains for a murder mystery weekend. I had it booked in for months, and it looked like it wasn't going to be a goer, for the last little while. But it's just happened to have coincided with getting back to groups of 10. So putting the old 20s gangster suit on and getting ready for some good times up there as well.
Love it. That's brilliant. And how are you going, Ben?
Yeah, I'm good. A little bit weary today, but I'm like everybody, I'm up and down throughout this kind of period. I can't wait for it to be over. And what I've sorely missed is just human contact. I'm a people's person and I love people. And, as being a bit of an extrovert, I think it's probably taking its toll a little bit on me. But yeah, overall, I'm good. There's people in a lot shittier situations. So
yeah. Good stuff. So I'll let one of you start. Maybe David, you start. You tell me about a little bit about you, I guess, your background, and then Ben can have a go as well and tell us about him. And hopefully we meet in the middle and talk about how you formed Men's Table.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, in terms of me, I started life as a school teacher. I'd also done a couple of other interesting things by the time I was in my mid-20s. I had a ski chalet in France and opened a restaurant in England, down in Cornwall. Which part of the world are you from, Terry?
Amazing. So I was born in North London, but I lived in Edgware. I lived in pretty much Watford most of till I was 24 and when I came here. Yeah.
Right.
I've been to Cornwall. Lovely.
Nice.
Very nice
it's
spot.
a beautiful little part of the world. And then I had a corporate career as a management consultant. So I spent time working with the big companies and I'd never worked in one, so that was kind of interesting, and did 20 years in that. And then in 2013, wound things back. But from 2011, I was part of a business networking group, which is when I met Ben. And I won't steal his thunder on that story.
So next month, I'll have been in Australia for 30 years, which seems kind of strange. I'm originally from Somerset, and I find it hard to believe I've been here for 30 years. But I started off my career path with the very serious kind of corporate jobs. I was climbing up the corporate ladder quite fast. I worked in the UK and Dubai at an early age, and then actually got spectacularly fired from the corporate world, which was, and I never went back because we really weren't matched. It wasn't ever going to really be for me. Went traveling, spent a couple of years as a ski bum in Aspen, Colorado. Time of my life. Arrived in Australia. I came to a backpackers in Coogee, and I did the Coogee to Bondi walk, and I just kind of looked around and went, "Yep, this is for me. I'm going to live here." And now I live in Clovelly, so I'm like, I haven't moved very far in 30 years. So I got to this space, and that kind of and then I've been in the wine industry pretty much all the time since I've been over here, and I just kind of leads me on to the start of the men's table, really. So 2011, David and I were members of a business networking group called BNI, and we used to meet every single Thursday morning, very early in the morning, and we do business. And it was a very big group, but at the end of one meeting, I was talking to a couple of the guys, and I was saying, guys, I'm pretty depressed. I'm not very happy with life. Things aren't going well. My ex-wife is giving me a lot of grief. I feel really unhappy. And they just turned around to me and said, well, we know exactly how you feel. We feel the same way. And at that moment, I thought, there's something here. So basically, looking back on it, what had happened is I'd kind of opened the door for them to walk through. And we kind of use this term now a lot. If you empathize, you open that door to allow men to walk through. As the posh term is probably mutual self-disclosure. But it allows them to actually feel the same kind of way. And then the next week I stood up and I said, okay, I'm starting a men's group. Who's in? And we started meeting in a private room in a restaurant in Surrey Hills upstairs in June next month will be 9 years. Wow. And we've got 11 of the original 12 guys who still meet. And we in fact had our Zoom call last night, and we had 10 of the guys on. We'll go into that a little bit, but it's been quite extraordinary what we've kind of gone through. Beginning of last year, David called me and said he'd been approached about doing men's work. I've always had an interest in men's mental health, and I'll go into my own struggles, I suppose, a little bit later. But David called me, and do you want to kind of carry on from there?
Yeah, okay, sure. So we'd been, I suppose, sort of consciously going about the table that we'd been in, making sure it was working for everyone, and that it was really allowing people to speak openly and honestly about feelings. So we'd always been doing that. So when we thought, let's try this with other people, we went to our guys, said, look, let's write down what is it we've actually been learning about how to do this. And we got a couple of pages of dot points, and we put them together into a bit of a coherent flow, and we called them the fundamentals, which are sort of guidelines. They're not rules. And then we started to share them with a few guys. So really beginning of 2019, we ran an entree night in the Shakespeare Hotel in Surrey Hills, the Shaky. And by the end of the night, some guys said, we want to start our own table. And so off it went. And by the middle of the year, we had 7 tables, and we ran a crowdfunding campaign just to sort of see, how many people really support this idea. And we had really great interest in that. And then by the end of last year, we had 15 tables, and we've now got 18 tables. And there was a real sense of momentum just before COVID came, with the prospect of a bunch of other tables. We've got a couple that are keen to start pretty soon. And I suppose what we've found, and we've learned a lot from all of that, of course, just like you're obviously learning heaps about, your groups as well. But it really boils down to a few very simple things. It's in the vault, being confidential at the table so that people can really share. Really, the focus is on sharing feelings. So the I statements, this is how I feel. It's not about the ex-wife or the kids are doing this or the bastard down the road. It's how does all that stuff that's going on make me feel? And a real encouragement for people that they can just listen. So not everyone has to speak. And there's some other guidelines in the fundamentals as well. But it's mostly common sense. Some of the way we structure the table, we really invite men to take on the idea that everyone is a leader. There's no need to have a hierarchy. And also a key differentiator, we think, in what we've done is in our first table, MT1, we made a commitment to each other after a year or two to grow old together. We really sort of saw the potential for this to be a long-term thing. And so with the new tables, we just sow that seed, and there's no compulsion for them to make any sort of commitment. But what we do know is that when men make a commitment to be there for each other, it really builds a sense of community, because it's not just about a man getting his needs met. It's also being there on the other side of the table to be a listener when other men have got issues. And that sense of community is really a strong element of what we're seeing emerging in the way we've been going about it.
That's incredible. And I love the you said fundamentals, right? Was that the How did you, or why did you come up with them? Why did you not just do let's everyone meet up and have a few drinks and see what happens?
I'm going to just very carefully show you my teacher here. So which one am I going? We don't talk about footy and shit. So that's one of our taglines, and that came from one of the guys who came to one of our what we call entrees, which are our information nights. Because if men will get together, and we have a different kind of offering than some in that we ask them, we invite them into a deeper type of conversation. And it has to be structured. So the fundamentals are very much there. And we talked about this last night, actually, our table. But they're there to make sure that two things. The table doesn't fracture. So we have no politics, no religion, no alpha male behavior. That's really, that's not allowed. We very much, so it doesn't fracture, but they can drop into a different kind of conversation. So we have a view on the way that men talk. So if I talk about my views of the world, people can disagree with me, right? So they can go, oh, no, you're wrong, mate. If I talk about how I feel about the world, how am I actually feeling, what's going on for me, how am I feeling, people can't disagree with me because it's my actual feelings. So we very much encourage that. So it's the fundamentals are there to ensure that people aren't just talking about footy and shit. Because one of the things is at the table, we don't have to be best friends, right? We're not best friends. I talk footy and shit with my mates. You're going to go down the pub tomorrow, and potentially talk about footy and shit. Talk about Watford or whatever you're going to talk
Absolutely.
about. So the fundamentals are really important. They're a real cornerstone of what we do.
And sorry, you go ahead.
If they're not followed, people just drift off.
Yeah.
And people can, respecting time, we'll always get a few guys who will try and take over. And the fundamentals kind of keep that in place, because some of the guys who have a lot to share are often fairly shy. They're not used to, or they don't have the skills in sharing. So they need to be allowed to have that time.
I love it. And I think it's brilliant that you have some sort of like guidelines around it, and also there's an expectation in one sense as well, because you're right, like turning up and just talking about we have been painted obviously with this brush sometimes, us men, that is all we talk about. And it's just a default easy conversation to have, right? Like, how's work? Oh, work's crap. Oh, did you see this game? Yeah, I saw it. And I think I got bored of that a long time ago, and I I think I always wanted more from a conversation from people, and I assumed they didn't. And I had this just view that my mates didn't want to talk about that. And you said, Ben, you said it to a couple of people that actually I'm depressed. And I pretty much did the same, like almost the same, to two mates that I actually, fairly masculine kind of guys that I thought would just, and I'd had a couple of beers at the time, I thought, I'm just going to say it. And I said it, and there was nothing said for a minute. And then it was like, well, actually, I've been to see this, and I've got these issues since my childhood, and then this thing with my dad, and then blah blah. I was like, oh wow, it was like this floodgate, not in a real, sudden everyone was pouring everything out, but I just assumed, and I think I convinced myself that other people just didn't. I thought I was weird. I thought I was a freak because I didn't. There were just things I thought about, and when I opened up, people did. I was like, oh my god. Like where has this been? Like the pressure of this just holding back all of us I was 30 at the time, maybe 29. And one of my mates a little bit older, and I said, wow, that's a lot to bear for a long time for everyone. So that's brilliant. And I guess is there much resistance to it if someone's coming for the first time? How do they find the fundamentals
I think the resistance is happening in people's living rooms, and when they see something or get a glimpse of a group like yours or ours, and maybe the thought is, oh, okay, that's there. Now the question is, are they willing to kind of recognise that maybe there could be benefit there? I think the guys who come forward and come to entrees and so on have already made that decision. Okay, this is probably worth having a go at. Having said that, the way tables start, a couple of guys who want to start a table, or even if it's one guy, we make sure that they've got a collaborator, a co-host to get a new table started, so guys aren't doing it on their own. So those guys will go out and just spread the word amongst their networks, and sometimes a guy will come forward to a table where they're just kind of kicking the tires on a first night, and for some of them it is still maybe too confronting. And it's not like we're trying to scare them away or whatever, but we're not going to shy away from the invitation, which is this is a place to have a real conversation, and particularly to talk about feelings and to really be there to listen to another. Because another of the key guidelines, the fundamentals, is no fixing. Because, otherwise what happens, somebody does spill their guts and then it's just game on, right? Let's just sort this guy out. Let's get in there and tell all of our stories because that might help him. And it's an instinct. But it really starts to detract from the guy who's sharing and putting his heart on the sleeve. There's certainly a place and a time where they might ask for advice, like, guys, I want to tell you something about what's going on, and maybe you can give me some other perspectives. But a lot of the time, guys don't necessarily ask for that. They just want to unburden. They just want to release. So when that happens, it's a powerful thing. But not everyone's ready to do that. We've got guys across a whole spectrum of how open they are. Like even Ben and I, Ben says, he wears his heart on his sleeve. It's much more difficult for me to kind of warm up to that. And then we've got a guy at our table, our founding table, probably 5 or 6 years in, we really probably hadn't got too much of a glimpse of his inner world. And then we started to see little bits coming forward. So it took him longer to start feeling comfortable and safe. So I think everyone's working at their own level, and I think a lot of the resistance is before they even step forward to a Mr. Perfect barbecue or a men's table.
I think that's what I was saying just before we came on. Like we're finding when we set up what we did, and I'm sure, I've got so many ideas that have come out to literally just what you guys have said, but we just set it up and went, here's a space for you to come and be yourself and say what you need to say, etc. But we made it a little more vague, and I always wondered why people sort of weren't comfortable with it or weren't coming, and I think the fact that you've set that expectation in one sense is really good, because I thought maybe people would shy away from that, but it's actually in the middle where guys don't know and they're confused. They're like, well, is this a men's group where I can actually, and it's, you said yourself, a confidential, or is it just somewhere I go because I need to get out of the house? Or I think having a very clear structure to it clearly speaks to us as men. I think it does when, And when you've been burdening that for so long, you said the guy, it takes him 5-6 years. You know, we've probably had people, you know, until I was 30, until I just went boom, and then it all came out, and then there was no going back. So I'm comfortable doing it now. But some people, I guarantee, like mates I've got, or people turn up to the barbecues, they're just listening. They'll offer some words now and again. They just, you can tell that the brain's wearing away when someone else is telling their story or saying how they feel about something, and you can almost see it. It's like you can read that they want to say something, but they're not ready yet, and that's fine. We never put pressure on anyone to go boom, like you have to. But I love it. I love the fact that you've got some structure to it and expectation as well. So people know what they're letting themselves in for, right? So,
men don't have to talk. You know, we have guys who will turn up at tables and they don't talk for a couple of months. But the fact is, they're there and they're listening. And the guys they're listening to possibly have no other outlet. So, you know, they can't talk about how they're feeling at home. They can't talk about how they're feeling at work. Like they've had kids, all the friends have kind of dropped away and they're just there. So it's really important that if your commitment is really important, we ask men to commit to turn up, because not just about you. It's about the men that you are supporting and forming into a community. We start at 7, we finish at approximately 9, but the start at 7 is a sharp start at 7. The reason being is the guy who has had something happen in his life and is waiting for the table to come along will probably start talking at 7 o'clock and go, blah, blah, blah. If somebody rocks in at 10:07 and goes, oh man, the traffic was really bad and da 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 da, that guy's lost the ability to really tell his story. So we are, let's say, strict about a few things, but pretty relaxed about, you know, but other things. We certainly want to keep a flat structure so everybody is eventually equal around the table.
And what do you, I guess, generally find then works? So it's not just, okay, tell your story, next person, etc. How do you really engage that kind of connection? Like, how do you, I don't know if it's like the secret sauce, always talk about it. I think about it all the time, right? And then it's too structured in my head. So then I know it wouldn't be natural trying to get people to connect. So what works for you guys, or what have you seen works or observed?
We've seen a fair bit of this. We've seen a fair bit of this. And what will happen is the first sharing that goes deep sets the scene. Okay. If you get some people who just start to talk about football or whatever they're talking about, or the share isn't that deep, it will set the scene quite often. But as soon as you get a deep share, that's opened the door, and it opened the door for other guys to potentially to have a go. But there's no, I personally, some tables do it. I personally hate going around in a circle. David has a beautiful term, which is a popcorn turn. It's popcorn. It goes off when it's ready. And again, that doesn't force people to talk when they don't want to talk. Sorry, David, I jumped in there. Do you want to?
No, that's okay. No, I mean, look, it's important, I think, to note too that what we're doing is seeding new tables and giving them the best possible starting point. But we also, one of the guidelines talks about the groups committing to their own evolution. So groups will take it in their own directions. As long as they're kind of really getting the value from the table through the listening, through the sharing of feelings, through the building of commitment and the community, they'll do it in their own ways. So we've got some tables where there might be someone who's got some, meeting facilitation or consulting background. We've got other groups that don't have those skills in the table. So they'll all do it their own ways. A bit more structure early on seems to be what some of the tables are for, where they make sure there's kind of roughly equal time, so that somebody doesn't dominate the whole table. And then there's 3 guys at the end of the night who actually were keen to say something and they haven't been invited to, or there hasn't been time. But certainly in the evolution of our table, 9 years on, we've been through some really clear stages where we started to loosen up the structure, and we didn't need as much. So, on a given night now, one of the guys last night we had our meeting, and one of the guys, we focused on him for probably, 40 minutes because that was the need. And he was the one we could feel, he needed to get into it and really, have our listening, a few questions to help him think through some more stuff and whatever. Whereas, one of the other guys virtually said nothing. But he's been through his own stuff. And, if I go 6 months ago, he would have taken 45 minutes to share because of something that was going on for him. So I think that's part of the evolution, and each of the tables, based on their characters and the people who are there, are doing it in slightly different ways, but still adhering to the common foundations, which is why I guess we call them the fundamentals.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I guess, obviously anonymous, but some of the stories or some things that really stand out for you over the last nine years, I think you said, like some of the powerful stories you've heard, is there a general theme of them, or is there some that are just, you're like, wow, that blow you away now? Or
I'll talk about the general theme, then I'll talk about a specific story. The general theme is we've been doing it 9 years, and the other tables that we see coming through, what we've learned is every single person is like that, and they all have different issues going on. There are all kind of different stuff going on. The overarching thing we seem to have found is isolation is one of the biggest things, is the lack of friendship. That men, we have a term that says men are socially lazy. So they are, often the wife will be the one who will do all the organizing, and the man will tag along. And then when the kids,
that resonates for me. That's so, yeah.
And then when the kids come along, the wife will make the friends at school. And, you might be interested to somebody's husband, you don't really know them. So there's a lack of friendship. So that's the overarching thing that we found. The biggest story we've probably had at our table is one of the guys who lost a son in basically it was a kind of a hit and run accident, and that was very traumatic, obviously, for him. He actually got the floor for months and months and months, because you can't imagine anything worse than that. We've all got a lot of stuff that goes on, and that was very, very heart-wrenching for everybody. But we've had all sorts of stuff. We've had recovering alcoholics, recovering drug, recovering gambling problems, lots of stuff. And David, you might have a few other stories that you can.
Some of the things that stand out for me can be the simplest and the most subtle of things that will happen overnight. And we also see this. We're typically there to help a new table launch, and so we get a glimpse. When guys are first showing up, and even in that first table, we're inviting a round of sharing, and then we're helping them set up, and then we don't come back the following month. It's over to them. But I remember one guy. He came along to a first table. And he was an older guy, just into his 70s, and his body language, I'll try and sort of demonstrate it, was like all tangled up, and he was like twisted around in his chair. It was so clear that he was really uncomfortable, but he'd come. And we went around, and different men were saying stuff, and it was kind of near the end of the night, and he said, all right, I'll say something. And he still was all jammed up in himself, but he started talking about how he'd just gone through a second separation, and how he's now alone, and how he never imagined he was going to be old and alone. And he didn't have tears in his eyes, but you could just feel the emotion deeply held in him, the pain. And I was just so touched in that moment by this man who had so much sort of emotional trauma going on, and his world had shattered, and here he was just voicing it to these strangers who he'd just met, an hour before. I mean, that sort of stuff happens a lot, and it's just incredibly moving to see men access something and voice it. And, it doesn't have to be like the biggest trauma in the world that they've just gone through. It can be just something that they're stuck with in their life. And, it constantly invigorates and inspires me to keep doing this work, because it just opens my heart to them, and I sort of, I feel like we share that man's pain in those moments.
And how do you connect in between I guess the tables? Do you speak to? Because I guess what I'm alluding to it, because I worry like about the guys who come to our barbecues and even the people I've chatted to on our Facebook group, and we don't sort of download everything in there, but I do worry about them in between, because I go, well, what if they don't come to the next one, or what if I get a message from someone saying this has happened, or I do think about it in between. Do you do anything in between to kind of socialize, or is it more? Or do people engage in that or not, or they just want to come for the dinner every month? Or?
I think it really varies, and different groups have got move into the rhythm of how they communicate more swiftly than others. Some groups are slower to see the value of that in between month meeting. We're getting an app developed so that it can put a tool in the guys' hands where, sure, they can choose WhatsApp or a Facebook Messenger group, but often they're not all on the same devices. Some guys don't want to be on Facebook. I'm not a Facebook user. So, but also they can just, manage their table. They can chat with each other. And we're starting to realize that, to strengthen our encouragement of that, checking in with each other, because you're absolutely right. Like, just because you might be fine overnight when the men's table's on, next week you don't know what's going on for a guy.
Yeah, we've got so go for it, Ben.
One thing, I always think about is, and there's one guy in particular I'm thinking about now, is, be quite blunt, some kind of tragedy or some kind of thing is coming towards you in your life. Why not have a group of friends around you who can support you through that? One guy who joined our second table, he wanted to join it. He was an expat, and we have a few expats because we've got no history. And he realized the importance of the men's table when he was stood in the morgue at 3 a.m. in the morning, and he had to identify his niece who had suicided. And he said he could not wait for the men's table then, because, and the fact is, hopefully nothing as tragic as that happens to people, but things will happen in your life, and to have a group of supportive peers around you is really important.
Now, I'm thinking, as you're talking, I'm thinking of some of the mates I have these sort of conversations with, and almost the, I guess, evolution of where maybe I thought we were 5 years ago when we started Mr. Perfect, and then now even the friends that are involved in Mr. Perfect but might not be involved heavily, and they don't say too much, and we normally talk about work or stuff, but when I get them on their own, I have like a really good chat with them, and I have like the best chats, and we have this really deep engagement, and I feel like I'm better in that scenario, like on my own. But do you feel I guess what my question is going to be, I can't remember what my question is going to be actually, but when those crisis moments happen, I guess, is it a case of like an open, maybe in the fundamentals or in the rules, the guidelines, whatever, do you sort of encourage them to reach out to other members of the group, or is it kind of implied that they would do that anyway?
I think we really encourage that there's an overarching responsibility and kind of care of other men, whether they're in your table or indeed whether they're outside of your table. Like if we just start to develop more care for each other as men and have our heart open to each other, then the behaviours and the instincts can come, can't they? Like there's an opportunity then to check in, because at the very least someone might share, I've just, there's been a tragedy in my family. So then the guys can just sort of check in, are you okay, or whatever. So I think, but not everyone, is as open as we said before. So, we've also had guys who have been through some pretty heavy shit, and we haven't known about it for a month or two because they aren't ready to open up until they're ready,
Yeah. I can definitely subscribe to that. I remember when my dad passed away, and I come back from the UK and just went straight back to work the next day. Didn't tell my boss, didn't tell anyone. And that wasn't weird to me, though. That was the weird, for me internally, that's just how I dealt with it, and I got on with it. And that was another thing I put to the back of the, just a little bit more pressure. And now, thankfully, I don't have that. Like, it doesn't build up as much. But I think what you're doing is just incredible. Some of the, even though it's just a couple of stories there, I can really see how it helps those guys. Do they do they ever talk about if they access professional help from clinicians, GPs, psychologists, psychiatrists, you name it? Are they quite open about that, or how have you found that?
Yeah, but all men are different. Some guys will talk about it. Other guys, aren't going to be so open about it. One thing we established quite early on is that we put peers before professionals. So if we've got 12 men sitting around the table, we've got 12 experts at being men. Yeah. And so far, we really rely on that. We have taken steps, talking to Lifeline. David and I have both attended a course called the Assist course, which is suicide intervention, which we both highly recommend that do. It's a very intense course. But, it depends. Some guys will talk about it. Other guys would say, will just literally want to unburden themselves. Other guys will say, guys, I need a bit of a hand with this. But yeah, I just I picked up on something that we've got a little bit of a feed going on there on the right from Facebook. Just something that John's mentioned there is, so what do you do when you don't agree? One of the fundamentals is that everything that happens is sorted out at the table. Okay, we don't go off and have sidebar conversations. We don't go off and have sidebar conversations and talk about people. We really sort it out at the table. And that has led to some major blow-ups at the table. I'm a pretty calm person, but I've had my finger out and right at the table. But what happens is we sort it all out there, because if you don't sort it out at the table, you're never going to sort it out, and it will just fracture and it will just fall apart. So we've had some very intense times. So when we don't agree, it is sorted out at the table. And those agreements are often about maybe people straying into areas that could cause a problem in the table, or somebody saying we're not going deep enough, we're just talking about shit and football. So yeah,
I love it. James just commented as well. One of our community, we have to care more for each other and check in with each other. Like, it's so simple, it's so obvious and simple, right? But do we do it enough, really? Like, sometimes I know I'm thinking about friends right now as we're talking. I'm going, man, I need to check in with them properly and actually have have the real questions at them rather than the soft stuff. And also, James mentioned Assist is an amazing course. So clearly, I think he works in mental health, actually, James. So he's probably done that as well. One thing
I'll jump in there, Terry. Just this idea of caring for each other. We were really privileged to been working with the Mental Health Commission, National Mental Health Commission. They said, do some research on what you're doing. And initially we thought, oh, God, we just want to build tables. But having done it and looked into the research and then done a survey with men at tables, there's this whole thing which is just the masculine stereotype and how restrictive and stuck that is. And it's welded onto all of us from the way we've been raised. And it's about not showing emotions. It's about, being resilient and going, no, I'm all sorted, mate. I got it taken care of. It's about not building intimate friendships. All of these things flow from these norms that we've been enculturated with. And caring is a part of that. Like, if you have a look, who's the most caring person in your life, you're probably going to think of a woman. You're probably going to think of your mother, of your wife, of your sister. But wouldn't it be great if we had a world where, men were able to access that level of care for each other as well? And I think it's eminently possible. It's just that we've been conditioned to not have those qualities on display, because it looks weak or supposedly weak.
Well, you made me just think of, I was watching a speech. Sometimes I'm on YouTube, it will just default to like the next video, and I was trying to do some work and it was going on in the corner. And a speech came up of a guy it was based on the true story, the Catch Me If You Can, with Leonardo DiCaprio. So the guy, Frank Agnelli, I don't know how to pronounce his surname, but long story short, he left home at 15, his mum and dad split up, or 16, he ran away, became, conned everyone into thinking he was a pilot, traveled the world, conned everyone to think he was a doctor, like just incredible, intelligent, cunning, but incredible guy. Anyway, they interviewed him at 60 in front of Google, and he told this speech, and you have to look it up. It's incredible. And I'm watching it and listening and going, he's a bit of a con man, and thinking in the back of my brain, like judging it. And you hear his story and why he ran away and everything when his mum and dad split up. and he was forced in front of the courts when they got divorced, and didn't realize he was going there. And he like vaguely remembers it as a kid. And from that day, he literally ran, never saw his dad again. His dad passed away, etc. But what he does remember is everyone else had made up this story about him and said, "Oh, this is what happened in the film." And he said, "My dad, like every night, he goes, from the day I was, I could remember coming to my room, me, my sister, my brother, kiss us goodnight, tell us he loved us, asked us if he could do anything, all these things." And I'm watching this, and I was like tearing up because I'm watching it going, wow, like if my son says that about me, and I do that anyway now, like I didn't have that, but I do it. And I go, man, that's what I want them to remember. Like that they could come to you and that you tell them that every day. That's just made me think of that. That's caring, right? That's, from the start. And it was so powerful watching it, but I recommend people watch it. It was really, really good. The one thing I was going to ask you guys, it's circling back a bit, like how did you, Ben, you sort of alluded to how, like your story, I guess, and how you come to sort of men's table. But I know from my own story, I was that guy who just bottled everything up. And my way of dealing with it, when I finally sort of got professional help and started talking and I guess it became more comfortable, I still then decided to set something up for someone else and thought, well, this kind of gives me some pleasure and helps me and is therapeutic that other men can access it. When you had your troubles, you don't have to go into too much sort of detail, but how did that come about? Was Men's Table a direct sort of reaction of the story, or
great question. So I suppose my grandfather in particular had a great thing of social justice and was a very an active Quaker. So it came a Quaker and did a lot. And I've always had his picture around as inspiration. So and hopefully I'll write a book one day about him. That's one of the plans. And I've carried that with me, that thing of social justice and always doing your bit, whether you're on the committee at the son's school for the football committee or whatever it is, you always do your bit. And I just wanted to do my little bit because I've been through my struggles, and I've always been very open. I've always been like, here I am. This is what's happening. And it was literally a moment talking to two guys about, and I just went, they're telling me the same thing, and that's key, is that opening that door. So what happened to me was I got very depressed in that I didn't know why I was getting depressed. I didn't know why I was a class clown at school. I'm smart, but I never got good grades. I couldn't do all that. Kind of long story short, some guy I went for a walk with one day said, "Oh, I think you might have ADHD," and that was David. And I kind of went, "Oh, okay. What does that mean?" And we did a lot. He talked about a friend he had, and I went home straight away and Googled it and did all the stuff. And yeah, fuck, that's me. That's me. So I went off, saw my therapist. I did the test. Top marks. Thank you very much. But before that, I would literally call myself the 30% man, right? So I'd have all this imagination going on, and I'd have all these little projects going on, and I would do 30% of all of them. So I'd have 10 things going on, and I'd do 30% of all of them, then get bored and be like, what's next? What's going on? I didn't know why until that ADHD got named. That really helped me go, now I understand. So I work myself in a particular way. I avoid doing stuff I don't like doing and I can't doing. It's not because I'm lazy. It just doesn't suit my brain. And it's an absolute trial. So I am blessed to be working with somebody like David, who crosses every T and dots every I, because it's like for me, sometimes I'm reading stuff and I go, oh. So it stems from ADHD, which is a strange thing, and people might not really fully get it or think you're lazy or you're the class clown. But I think I was always brought up with a sense of compassion, which is something I think we could really dig into that about what's going on in the world right now. But you have to be compassionate, and David and I both believe that going to a table is not just about yourself. It's providing a sense of purpose. in that you are helping your fellow men with something or other. So, just doing the bit, doing the right thing. It sounds a bit wanky because I'm not a wanker, but just doing the right thing,
I just had a pre-recorded one of these earlier with a doctor friend of mine who's kind of our clinical advisor, I guess. He's trained to be a psychiatrist, and I've always just got on with him from day one, and we had a real affinity, similar kind of stories, and he's very thoughtful and just top guy. And he said, I was asking him, well, how do you show like compassion? Well, no, I think I used a different word, with patients when this is happening or with your family. And he said, well, actually, I don't see it as sort of empathy. He's like, I think it's another level of that, of compassion. And I always use the word, I don't know why, I like labeling it, right? So I'm going, oh, it's empathy. And he's like, no, like I know I show true compassion to them. And I think that's why they respond to me. So when you mention compassion, I'm like, yeah, it's spot on. We definitely need to show more of that.
And that works at all levels. So 3 days a week, I work with schizophrenic men, and it's very, very simple. All you need to do is spend valuable time with them, and be compassionate. You can't fix them. They are, some of these guys you'll never fix, but you just got to spend time with them and show them compassion. And that works across the board for every human being. Yeah,
no, I love it. And what's next for Men's Table? What's the plans, David? I'm assuming you're the planner.
We're literally yesterday, sort of pressed the trigger on our next stage of business planning. We've been more emergent. We've had our plans, but they've been, pretty sketched out, pretty loose, and it's just been flowing in front of us. When we first started this out, a guy who subsequently became part of the second table and also has built our website. So we literally hadn't started, and he said, you better hang on to the coattails of this thing because it's going to take you for a ride. And the first 15 months were just this experience of total flow. So there wasn't need for any sort of planning in as much as, it was just like, wow, this is kind of taking us. But we were at a point, and I think COVID, we were talking before where you're at as well, COVID's given us a chance to take a half a breath and just step back and have a look. And it is time for some planning because, we want to make sure our tables are healthy and well functioning. We want to make sure men know about us so that, if it's for them, they can make that choice and step in. We want to be able to be across the country. And so we want to, we have to work out how do we ensure that the tables in different parts of the country are supported. We've got a great pool of men already who are really committed to what we do. So how can we help them be volunteers? And, Ben and I want to do this in a way that's proper and not just voluntary. So how do we generate some funds and some grants with it all as well? So those kinds of things are planning questions. And, a big part of it's partnerships. So really appreciate, your interest and working with guys like yourself because we can see we're part of a bigger movement. So partnerships is a key thing. The table program, just making sure it's robust and continuing to develop, offer guys more so that they can find their way into tables and know how can they be a better listener? How can they, if something's not working at their table, like John was asking in his question, how can they bring it forward into their group? So that's the second thing is just the healthy functioning of tables. And then the third is just getting the word out, strapping on the second marketing engine because so far it's all been word of mouth and now it's time to just let more men know about what's going on so that they can make that choice if they want to. So they're really the three priorities. Yeah.
Brilliant. And where can our guys find out more about you?
So it's themenstable.org and the best place for them to start on the contact page, they can hit us up, but there's dates for the next entrees, and at the moment they're online. I think the next one's in June. What's the date in June, Ben? Maybe the 16th of June. I think it's the 16th.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
And it's an hour and a half, and they'll get a really clear picture of how the tables work, and then they can just make a choice. Is this for them? Do they want to be part of starting a table? Do they want to join a table that's near them already? So that's the best way to start.
It's amazing. You're giving me so much things to think about, and just having this chat personally, I've definitely taken a lot from it, thinking about particularly the fundamentals. It's a real thing that's just going to stick in my mind with the way we structure the barbecues, because obviously we can franchise this and like just keep rolling out things, but yes, there's going to be different flavors, and yes, there's going to be different demographics, but really you don't just want it a place to go. And I think that's what I'm taking away from this. There needs to be some level of extra care and productivity from it, so they go away feeling like they've gained something and definitely got something off their chest as well. So I love it. It's unbelievable. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, with the fundamentals, it will do two things. It will stop it from fracturing. It will stop certain personalities from taking over and drowning out the other voices. And it will also offer them an invitation to drop into a deeper level of conversation. Amazing. So those are the two real things, yeah.
And the survey we just did, the guys that responded, 75 of them, 95% said the table is a safe place to share and be heard, and was like, wow, if we're creating that, that's awesome, because if that safety's there, then they're going to be willing to put their heart on their sleeve.
Brilliant. No, that's absolute gold. I will. I'll make sure I share you guys far and wide after this, and to our networks and following and everything else. And I'll make sure I put the website link as well tomorrow. So anyone who missed this, we'll share it. We'll have a link on YouTube as well. So I really hope people can watch it back. I know already in my head I'm going to watch this tomorrow at lunch. So I want to read. I wanted to get my pen out and make notes just then, and I thought that'd be rude. So. But I will. Thank you so much for your time.
And
guys.
Terry, I want to acknowledge the work you're doing. You're very good at this too. You're a very good interviewer, very good conversationist, and you're very open. So I really want to just acknowledge the work you're doing, and hats off to you, mate.
That's very nice. It's easy though when I think the point is easy when you connect with people, and I can connecting with you guys and listening to your passion and everything else. That's wow, blown away. So thank you so much, and everyone, make sure you check out the men's table again. I'll share the details. David, Ben, thanks for your time. And
thank you.
We'll be chatting very soon. See you guys.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.